Lovelock, Nevada, 1911. Inside a narrow cave, two miners are searching for bat guano, a key ingredient in making fertilizer. But as they head deeper into the darkness, they make an unexpected discovery. They find more than 40 human skeletons, some of which are abnormally large.
In 1911, giant bones were found in Lovelock Cave. Large human skulls and skeletons that measured between 7 and 8 feet in height, which for ancient man would have been rather significant.
This caused a sensation, and one of the strange things about the discoveries in Lovelock Cave is that the skeletons were often found with red hair. And so it does seem like they were a different kind of people than the Native Americans from that area.
Although many of the large bones found in Lovelock Cave were unfortunately lost to time, for decades, a number of skulls were preserved at a local museum.
Until about 10 years ago, there were 4 very large skulls on display inside the museum. These were then removed and ceremonially buried. What's also interesting is that over 100,000 artifacts were excavated from Lovelock Cave. The strange thing is that many of the artifacts were huge. Like, you have giant-sized sandals, like a 15-inch long shoe, which is size 29 US, which would fit someone who's about 9 feet tall. And even pieces of clothing, which were so big, it looked as though they were worn by giants.
The idea that giant bones were actually found in a cave in Nevada may sound far-fetched to some. But the truth is that there were many such discoveries reported during the Wild West.
In the southwestern United States, there's several very strange stories of these dead corpses or skeletons being found regularly. In terms of the reports of giants, this is a compelling motif. People were fascinated by this idea of a giant race that had lived here previously. And this connects to a lot of biblical belief that tended to be fairly literal back in the day. And the Bible talks about back when there was a race of giants that lived among the earth. And so, for many people in the Wild West, when you see some skeletons dug out of the earth that seem to corroborate this, this was an affirmation of literal biblical beliefs as well.
Is it really possible that a race of giants once inhabited the Old West, as the numerous discoveries reported throughout the 1800s suggest? And if so, was evidence of these giants recovered in Lovelock Cave? Perhaps a clue can be found by examining the history of the indigenous Paiute people who have inhabited the Nevada desert for centuries.
A woman named Sarah Winnemucca, who was a descendant of Chief Winnemucca of the Paiutes, wrote a book in the 1800s and recounted her people's battle with this race of giants, the Sitka. Now, what's fascinating about this is that she says that it was an actual battle, not part of tribal lore or mythology, but something that actually occurred. The Sitka were red-haired and lived in the mountains near the Paiute Nation, and they were cannibals. According to the Paiutes, they naturally grew tired of being cannibalized, and they confronted these giants.
A war was started between the giants and the Paiute people. For 3 years, they battled one another. The last of the giants holed themselves up in the Lovelock Cave, and the Paiute people stuffed the openings with a bunch of brush and firewood and lit the place on fire. And that was the end of the red-haired giant cannibals.
What's also interesting is that when the discovery was made in 1911 at Lovelock Cave, they also found evidence of extreme burning, which took place near the entrance to the cave. So this matches the story almost precisely And again, we have evidence of red hair because Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins actually saved some of the hair and sewed it into a mourning dress, which she used when she gave lectures. And so the story of the Paiutes defeating the Giants then suddenly became a reality.
For many, the evidence in support of the Paiute story about the red-headed giants is compelling. Not only because of what was found in Lovelock Cave, but also because there have been reports of giant bones being discovered in other places throughout the western Nevada desert.
If you go back and look through the records, and you can find numerous accounts of bones, skeletons, and giant-sized artifacts that have been found in this area. In 1904, it was reported that an 11-foot tall skeleton was found. And then we have accounts in 1931 of an 8.5-foot skeleton that was reported. And so the fact is, you have the stories, you have the skeletal evidence, and you have the artifacts, and even the legends that prove this was a real story of giants in this area.
To be sure, the Paiutes believe this to be a historical truth. People might dismiss them as just folklore, but again, who's to say that it didn't happen? Of course there were ethnic conflicts, of course there were wars, and of course people tend to remember this. So this has been a real important part of many, many people's historical beliefs and how they think about their own history.
Mecca. It is home to one of the world's largest religious structures, the Grand Mosque. In the center courtyard of this immense edifice stands a 43-foot-tall granite cube known as the Kaaba, the house of God. 5 times a day, every day, almost 2 billion Muslims across the world turn and pray towards this striking black monument, the holiest and most sacred site in all of Islam. Why? Because embedded in the eastern corner of the shrine is perhaps the most sacred stone in all the world, the Black Stone of Mecca.
For the world's 1.8 billion Muslims, this stone is crucial. When Muslims face in the direction of Mecca, they face in the direction of that stone.
This object, as simple as it might be, is of incredible significance to the Muslim faith because it is said to have fallen from heaven at the commands of Allah at the time of Adam and Eve. And it was said to have marked the position of the first temple, which obviously becomes Mecca itself.
Then the story is that that stone gets lost during the flood because Muslims have the same flood story that the Jews do from the Hebrew Bible. Then that stone for Muslims is rediscovered by Abraham. So Abraham with his son Ishmael build in Mecca the first place of prayer. That's why Mecca is important to Muslims, because this is the first place of prayer to the one God. Over time, it gets worn away, the building gets rebuilt. In 605, the Prophet Muhammad himself is the one that places that stone in its place. That's part of what gives it power.
Each year, millions of Muslims make a pilgrimage or Hajj to the Kaaba. Once there, visitors take part in a series of rituals called tawaf, which includes circling the Kaaba 7 times, in the belief that it will bring about true humility by linking them with God.
The black stone is therefore one of the focal points of the Hajj ceremony that every Muslim certainly tries to achieve during their lifetime. And they will then enter the central court of Mecca and, if possible, try to kiss the black stone in emulation of Muhammad, who was said to have set it up in this position in the year 605 AD.
Certainly the stories that have been built around it really pull people in. And some people have suggested that maybe it's something in the stone itself that pulls people in.
The stone itself pulling people in? But how? For the millions, if not billions, of Muslims who have made their pilgrimage to the Kaaba, there's no doubt that the black stone has an inexorable power that seems to draw them into its orbit. And according to some experts, that's because the black stone is not of this world.
Muslims believe that this was sent down by God to Earth. If we're scientific, we may call that a meteorite. If we're not scientific, we may call that miraculous. You know, here's this stone that comes from the heavens.
When a meteorite hits the Earth and somebody witnessed a fall and they were to go to that location, there's a variety of things that they might be able to find. If the stone falls in a sandy area, for example, there might be a lot of heat associated with the meteorite as it falls, and that could cause a fusion of the sand to cause some kind of glass to form. And so when you walk up onto it, you might find some interesting new features that you probably wouldn't have seen in that particular part of the world before.
Meteorites arrive from outer space being exposed to cosmic rays. They're slightly radioactive. To people not exposed to electromagnetic radiation, they might have been able to even feel that buzz from this rock, from the radiation, beta particles especially.
You know, whether you believe it was sent by God or whether you believe it was a random act, it has literally extraterrestrial origins. And so that creates a real power there.
Could the Black Stone of Mecca really have the power to physically affect people who come near it? Well, the truth is, we may never know for sure, because no one has ever been officially allowed to inspect or analyze it.
So there are a lot of exciting and interesting questions about the Black Stone. I think the first initial one is it actually a meteorite? A lot of people propose that, and there's some evidence, particularly from a local impact crater, that it came from there. And is there some sort of radiation energy that it emits or is coming from it that we just don't understand yet? So it would be really amazing to have the opportunity to analyze the Black Stone. There are obviously challenges, both sort of social as well as scientific. It's in the Muslim world, it's in a very sacred place, it's a very sacred stone. So bringing in scientists and doing careful analyses have those social challenges and would be difficult.
Tombstone, Arizona. The spirit of the Wild West is alive and well in this small town, where saloon doors still swing open and horses pull stagecoaches along Main Street. Founded in the late 1800s, Tombstone embraces its history, when outlaws, gunslingers, and violent shootouts were all too common.
Tombstone was a silver boom town. But what makes Tombstone so legendary was mostly the gunfight of the OK Corral. That was between the Earps, the Clans, the McClars, and Billy Claiborne. Also, Doc Holliday was involved in that gunfight. Now, the gunfight was actually in the alleyway leading into the OK Corral off Fremont Street. No one knows who fired the first shot. It was a 30-second gunfight. 38 shots were fired. And 3 men lay dead on the street. There's so much history around here. When you walk those streets in Tombstone, you're walking in the steps of history.
The gunfight at the OK Corral is the most well-known tale from this Wild West boomtown. But Tombstone's past is also riddled with bizarre, supernatural stories, including tales of strange creatures roaming the frontier that spread like wildfire in the 19th century.
There are a lot of legends that have come out of Tombstone, but there's one very curious one. In 1890, the Tombstone Epitaph reported a story about 2 ranchers who saw a giant flying creature in the sky above them.
The Tombstone Epitaph reported that they encountered a prehistoric-looking monster flying. Now, they said the whole body was about 100 feet long, and the head was about 8 feet long, loaded with razor-sharp teeth.
They not only were afraid of it, But apparently, they tracked it down and killed this creature and tried to take a photograph of it sprawled out.
According to local lore, a photo of the strange creature was indeed taken and even published in the Tombstone epitaph. But locating the supposed picture has proven to be difficult.
In terms of the photograph, there are legions of people who remember seeing this picture, even into the 1930s and 40s, yet no one has ever been able to locate it. And in fact, the edition of the epitaph that the story ran in didn't have any photographs at all.
Although the alleged newspaper photo has never been found, over the years, a number of bizarre pictures featuring cowboys and a massive winged creature have surfaced and can be seen on the internet.
One photograph depicts a group of men with a giant winged beast. The creature is winged, but it's not really a bird. It looks more like a pterodactyl, something prehistoric with large leathery wings and a large head with 2 feet hanging down below. It adds to the mystery of the creature and makes us wonder what exactly is flying around in the southern deserts.
While the images of the winged creature are compelling, historians have questioned their authenticity and claim that they may have been fabricated as a result of the fascination people have with this strange tale from the Old West.
Although most variations of the photos seem to be hoaxes, I think it's weird when you combine all of the things of the newspaper encounter, people swearing that they personally saw the photograph, and now it's gone. It only adds more history and wonder to the story. And I think in some regard, it makes it even bigger than it would have been.
Is the story of the Tombstone pterodactyl just a tall tale? Or is it possible that there really was a species of giant flying creatures that roamed the deserts of the Old West? Perhaps the answer can be found by examining accounts from Native American folklore of a creature known as the Thunderbird.
The Thunderbird is one of the most widespread, powerful creatures and symbols in Native American mythology. It is a gigantic bird, some kind of raptor, sometimes with somewhat human qualities, but it's connected with thunder and with lightning. Very often those flapping its wings is what creates thunder, and it shoots lightning out of its eyes.
The Thunderbird is common in Native American tribes all over the West. You'll find them on petroglyphs, on the rocks, or you'll find them in totem poles. It's a special bird, a special spiritual power of protection and support and strength. That's what the Thunderbird represents.
By some accounts, Thunderbirds were strictly spiritual beings. They lived in another world, and they were frightening, but could also sometimes lend their power to the people. On other occasions, they were purportedly real creatures that could swoop down at any time and snatch up humans if they so chose.
Is it possible that there is a connection between the Thunderbird and the winged creature that was reportedly seen near Tombstone, Arizona in 1890? For now, the answer is unclear. But people remain fascinated by the idea that massive winged birds really did soar over the American frontier.
It's important to remember that this is taking place in the Wild West. It's taking place when people are looking out for marvels and becoming aware of Native American explanations, Native American mythology at the same time. So people were aware that the Thunderbird was held to be out there, which leads us back to the question, the Thunderbird. Is it a cryptid, like it's out there somewhere? Is it simply a deity that's sort of cobbled together from abstract notions of what the divine is? Or is it sort of resulting from people finding pterodactyl skeletons and saying, wow, there must have been a great big bird here at some point? Or maybe all three. So this is still a great mystery.
Sardinia, 1974. On this island, located off the coast of Italy, a farmer in a region known as Monte Prama is tilling his fields when he strikes what appears to be a large rock. But upon closer inspection, he realizes that his plow has revealed something far more amazing. It's the head of a massive ancient statue.
The farmer started digging around it, brushing away the mud, pulled it out, and there was this giant stone head gazing back at him with these obsidian eyes. And so this became quite a sensation at the time. It was one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the decade.
Subsequently, archaeologists entered the area, and through the late 70s, they dug and they found over 5,000 fragments of these giant statues. We have archers, we have warriors, we have boxers. They are, generally speaking, about 8 feet tall and approach a ton in weight. And they are unique in the regard that for their time, there was no other statuary that was in human form and size and that level of detail and sophistication.
The monolithic statues came to be known as the Giants of Monte Prama. According to archaeologists, they were carved by the Nuragic people, a mysterious civilization that lived on Sardinia nearly 4,000 years ago.
The Nuragic people were the indigenous population of Sardinia, beginning around 1750 BCE. And they were not the kind of society that would have writing. So we don't know a lot beyond their everyday lifestyle, which would be in many ways similar to what was going on throughout the Mediterranean at the same time.
Incredibly, some researchers claim that the reason why the Nuragic people carved statues that were 8 feet tall is because these monoliths were created in the image of an actual race of giants.
One of the strange things about these statues is that they appear to be buried underneath these kind of slabs of stone in this elongated grave, as though they were almost like ancestors being buried in the ground. Why they did this, we don't know, but there are many legends of giants all over Sardinia, and the stories go on and on and on. So this could be the same giants who are memorialized in these particular statues.
Could the monoliths of Monte Prama really be evidence that a civilization of giants once inhabited the island of Sardinia, as some believe? Many researchers think that it's possible and claim that there are additional clues in folklore throughout the Mediterranean.
Diodorus, an ancient Greek historian, discussed how there was an ancient bloodline of the Athenian civilization known as the 50 Sons of Hercules that mated with a mortal race of women to create a giant bloodline that built these monolithic statues on the island of Sardinia.
This story really put the idea into different philosophers' heads that this was actually a very advanced culture that kind of led up to the time of the Nuragic people and culminated in the era of the Monte Prama giants.
The massive monoliths of Monte Prama and stories from folklore aren't the only pieces of evidence to suggest that giants once lived on Sardinia. Because there are also mysterious tombs located throughout the island that may have been where their oversized bodies were buried.
What we see at Monte Prama are totally separate structures for where they buried their deceased, and these are called the giants' tombs, Tomba dei Giganti. They are typically made of one very large stone that have a semi-hemispherical entry area or front that curves inward, with the center part having a small hole down at the bottom, which is where the skeleton would have been interred.
As you see these giants' tombs, what you realize is that it's entirely made of large blocks with a small opening in the base. In tradition, These were the burial places designed for giants. They would actually build the tomb around it. This is one of the clues that kind of links with the legends that giants did exist in Sardinia. But there is further evidence that actual skeletons have been found in some of these giants' graves. We have accounts from 1901 where there's a report of 4 9-foot skeletons being unearthed in the vicinity in northern Sardinia. And even relatively recently, there are reports of 3 skeletons being dug up in an area called Torralba in southwest Sardinia. However, the problem is that most of the evidence has now disappeared. They've just gone missing, basically. And so you have to question, why is this? Is there a cover-up?
Is it possible that the bones of giants have actually been hidden from the public? It's an intriguing theory, and it deepens the mystery surrounding the strange, towering statues uncovered at Monte Prama.
The Giants of Monte Prama are very unique and enigmatic. And Sardinia's myths and stories about who these people were typically talk about giants, but there's a lot of things we don't know about who these people were. And so these giant statues are the mystery within that mystery.
San Juan County, Utah, November 18th, 2020. In the remote sandstone canyons of the Utah desert, a team of biologists tracking sheep make a shocking discovery. They come upon a gleaming 12-foot tall metal monolith.
It's just a completely unearthly image. It's this big triangular prism, about 12 feet tall, firmly embedded in the desert ground in this incredibly remote place where there are no roads.
What the heck is that?
This is wild.
It's very difficult to get anything out there, let alone a 12 feet tall slab of metal. But what's very weird about it is using Google Earth satellite imagery, they eventually figure out that it has been there for 4 to 5 years without being discovered.
The sighting of this odd metal monolith looking like some kind of otherworldly portal was a shot heard round the world. In some regards, it was not a monolith because lith means stone, and this is a metal thing. But still, it attracted everyone's eyes. I think part of it was the mystery. How did it get there?
Numerous theories were put forth as to who might have created the so-called Utah monolith. And then, during the following months, the mystery took another twist as similar monoliths started popping up all over the world.
Other people became inspired by this monolith in the Utah desert and started copycatting from that. And so another monolith appears in India. Shortly after that, one shows up in Italy. You get one showing up in Pittsburgh, right outside of a candy shop. There's one that shows up in San Francisco that is made out of gingerbread. In the end, between November of 2020 and May of 2021, over 200 monoliths around the world just appear.
I guess this is the thing now, right? So be prepared to see these everywhere.
While some wrote off the worldwide monolith phenomenon as a cultural fad, historians were quick to disagree and claimed that something more profound was occurring that dates back to the dawn of history. Because, curiously, about 6,000 years ago, upright stones known as menhirs that bear a striking resemblance to the Utah monolith were inexplicably erected all over Europe.
When we look at this menhir phenomena, there's a time right around 4000 BCE where these sites pop up all over the place, at least in Europe. The most well-known are the ones that are in the UK and in France and Portugal and Spain. but it's actually a much larger and more expansive tradition. They started creating these everywhere. In Germany, we have the Wotan stone, and then 400 miles away, one of the oldest stones is the Menhir of Granson. Overall in Europe, there are over 35,000 standing menhirs still today in almost every country.
The number of ancient menhirs located throughout Europe is staggering, and many historians have wondered, why were so many monoliths created during the same time period?
Travel and trade had been standard for thousands of years. People are observant, and they like to remember and replicate and interpret and represent. So if somebody's travelled to, say, Rudston in East Yorkshire, and then they go back to Germany, and they say, I saw these amazing stones, let's have a go at making them. It's not impossible that people may have just observed this and then imitated it.
Is it possible that the phenomenon surrounding the Utah monolith was actually history repeating itself? And that humans have actually been imitating each other by building monoliths for thousands of years?
It's interesting that people don't want to take credit in modern times for creating these monuments. And that may give us some insight into the mentality of the people that built ancient monoliths. They didn't carve their names in there, and it perhaps was not about them either. It was about the human compunction to make a piece of immortality.